Everyone. I would like to welcome you to our first webinar for this year's webinar series. And this series is brought to you by CIES, Study Abroad International Student Special Interest Group, Star Scholars Network, and Journal of International Students. My name is Jenny Gao. I'm a scholar from George Washington University, and I will be your host today. Each month throughout the series, we're exploring the themes and questions related to study abroad international students. In each webinar, we feature a panel of study abroad international students experts, using a few questions centering on a theme to informally structure the conversation. And our topic today is Rethinking Education Across Borders, Emerging Issues and Important Insights. Before we dive into our chat, for some housekeeping, if you can hear me well, please click raise your hand button at the bottom of your screen. If you can't hear me well or the screen is a little bit fuzzy, please refresh your browser window and please make sure your speakers are connected and the volume is on. To those watching live right now, we welcome your comments and questions, so feel free to enter them in the Q&A session. We might have 5 to 10 minutes to address your questions at the end. Okay, so let me first ask our guest speakers to introduce themselves briefly, and please share your name, institution, and area of interest, and perhaps what brings you to the webinar today. Who would like to start first?
Krishna?
All right, I'll go first. My name is Krishna Bista, Associate Professor of Higher Education at Morgan State University. I'm also the founding editor of the Journal of International Student. The webinar we have been doing for a couple of years in the past from the Journal of International Student. We are pleased to share with you that we started our new special interest group within the CIES, Comparative and International Education Society, and also we collaborate with the Star Scholars Network. So we started this joint webinar on behalf of 3 institutions. And today I'm here joined by Dr. Gaulee, the president of Star Scholars Network.
Maybe I'll
Sure.
Hello, everyone. My name is Uttam Gaulee. As Dr. Bista mentioned, I lead an impressive group of scholars in the Star Scholars Network as president, and I'm very excited to be here. I also work at Morgan State University with Dr. Bista.
Thank you. Dr. Sharma?
Hi, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Sharma. I am an associate professor at Stony Brook University in the State University of New York system. I am in the writing department, writing and rhetoric. My interest, especially related to the themes, the discussions we're having, is in international students, cross-cultural communication, and I specialize in how international students, especially at the graduate level, are supported through academic writing, communication, research skills. I'm really excited to be here today, talking to everybody out there, and along with the other wonderful colleague, Krishna and Uttam, and thank you, Janet, and thank you, Corinne, for joining the conversation as well as facilitating them. I look forward to a good conversation.
Thank you very much. So thank you for the introduction. We're planning to use 3 general questions to structure our conversation, and we want all of you to chime in and informally advance the conversation, taking turns as you see there's a fit. Our first question would be, I will also type that on the chat box, so all of you will be able to see on the right side of the webinar. Just give me 1 second. Our first question will be, how should we rethink and resituate issues of international higher education in light of macro-level political and social-economic changes at a major destination, such as the United States in the post-Trump era, and the UK after Brexit, Canada in the post-Trudeau era, Australia with the crash of the international education industry, and also other emerging markets that you would like to talk about?
I can pick that up.
Thank you.
A little bit of context here first, because Dr. Gaulee is leading an unedited collection. It was last year, we were in Maryland and we were discussing these important issues, and we wanted to sort of invite scholars from around the world and put together an edited collection that would help scholars in the field of international education, international student services, study abroad, and related issues such as student affairs, student support. How we could look at our work, our research, our scholarship, the questions we ask, the methods we use, the interpretation we make of the data, as to how we could do that in the new context, because things have changed. Very often, the rugs have been pulled off of beneath our feet. Very often, the winds are blowing in very different directions. Very often, we don't know the orientations and the point of references that we used to have. Very often, the terminology and the perspectives and the theory and the method that we have don't seem to work. And so we, instead of continuing with the same old tools in this new context, we thought, maybe we need to really refresh, hit the reset button. We were asking new questions, think about these challenges, think about this context in which we are now. And so we thought, let's invite scholars who are interested in these issues and bring them together to sort of educate and enlighten the community to think, rethink about these issues, the issues, our work, our contribution to the field in light of the new context. The things that you just mentioned, politically, socioeconomically, geopolitically, and so on. So the first thing that I thought, I was at the time working on a book project. The book has just come out, supporting international graduate students, especially in the context of the new political dynamism, geopolitics in the world. And so I thought I was reading a colleague in my field named Tony Scott. Scott talks about political economy as a very, very important factor that we often ignore, because if we sit here in a particular department, do a particular kind of work and publish particular kind of literature, we often ignore that there is a bigger picture where the politics, the forces of economics shape, reshape, so often take away the thing that we do, right? So we can't just hold on to our old tools, methods, ideas, practices, services. And so it's important. For example, if the immigration laws and policies, or simply the immigration environment in a major destination for international students radically changes, it's going to affect everything. If we are moving away from the traditional model of bringing international students for the sake of, for many reasons, let's say diversifying student experience, adding a new pool of students that are able to contribute and make up for state budget deficits. But let's say we're completely ignoring those, pragmatic reasons. We're moving into this very political way in which we look at students. That will change. Often, the politics that happens from the, on the national level, especially because international students are inherently political, they're by definition political beings. They're brought from one political domain to another political domain, and in the process, as Simon Marginson says, it shows that they lose half of their rights, most of their privileges, their security, their sense of belonging. They're treated as outsiders, they're foreign bodies, right? So to begin with, international students are political beings, foreign objects in the first place. What happens when we also fundamentally change the context, the condition, the paradigm in which they used to be received? Okay, we cannot pretend the same things, we can do the same things in the same way, because we have to pay attention to those external forces that would destroy or undermine the work that we're doing. And therefore, the international education and international students are deeply implicated with the concerns of our sort of the larger political concerns. And I would add to that even in domestic students' concerns are implicated with the concerns of international students. For example, if I have 20% international students, but the university decides to take 40, MIT has 46. What happens to my domestic students? Why did they lose the privilege to go, to MIT, an American campus, right? American institution. Who decides and why? Who has the say in terms of the proportion of students? I'm not saying that we need fewer international students or we need more international students. I'm simply asking, this is a question that needs to be addressed by scholars in their research, in their teaching, in their programs, in their policy, right? And institutional conversations. And so those things become entangled. And we need a political awareness of the ideologies, political awareness of the macro level political forces, a political awareness about how we're going to support students at various levels of support, whether they are coming in, what kind of environment do they come in, whether they're transitioning, adjusting, what do they feel when they adjust to the rest of the community? What is the campus environment like? Is it welcoming? Are the students, domestic students, understanding or resentful? Did the major economic and political forces affect the way in which domestic and international students can relate to each other, can engage with each other, right? How do you do student affairs? Can you do it in the same way? Are these new issues of that have to do with gender, race, sexuality? Have these things changed because of the political change? How can you support students at the International Center, not only because visa rules have changed, but also because the environment in which students feel or don't feel comfortable, right? We cannot do our work of writing support, career support, tutoring and other interventions, professional development support without an awareness of the macro level politics. And so in the book that Dr. Gaulee is leading, and I'm asking him in a moment to say more a little bit about the unpacking, to unpack that project, is how can we become conscious of the new political economic condition and do our work as effectively as before, but only calibrated, adjusted, adapted, conscious of the new situation. We need to rethink our questions. We need to revisit our issues. We need to identify new issues. And I think it is time to really hit the reset button. That's why we are here today. I hope that our audiences would ask us and push us in that direction. I hope we can have more of these conversations. And I'd like to ask Krishna or Uttam to pick it up from there. In response to the first question, and then you can go to the second question after maybe 5 or 10 minutes.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. Dr. Krishna and Gaulee, do you want to chime in and maybe add more points on that?
I agree with Dr. Sharma, the main agenda, how the student faculty members, even those staff who have been working on behalf of international programs, the current political scenarios or geopolitical upheavals across the nation and across the globe has it has created a new level of tensions for all of us. Every day we get phone calls from the students outside the US asking about how the political scenario has been taking us to the next level. As in working professional in the field, either we do research or serve the students on campus. I think we need to be very strong on what we serve, how we serve, to the best need of our students. But it has definitely created a new level of fear for many of us.
Yeah, definitely. Great way of putting it together, Dr. Bista and Shyam, Dr. Sharma, really laid out the context of the sea changes that are happening at this point. But what we found desperately lacking in the field is the discussion on how we address this. So our argument is we not only need to rethink it, but we also need to rewire our brains, and we actually need to replace the lenses that we wear to look at the issues, the problems. Are we looking at the right places? Are we finding the right findings? So we need to reset, and as Dr. Sharma puts it, push the reset button so you find you are surprised, you are open to the new ideas that are brought to the table and the new opportunities of invention and questioning our assumptions. So we really wanted to see this change reflected in the scholarship coming. So that's what has prompted us to take on this challenge of editing a new volume. And what just follows after that is how we are changing the curriculum in those terms, and what support services, which Dr. Bista will shed more light on probably in the next few minutes. So I think, yeah, that's my take on this, and I look forward to definitely unpacking these in the following questions. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you so much for the excellent discussion. Before we move to the second question, I saw there are more attendees joining our webinar, and to add a short notes to those of you watching live right now, we welcome your comments and the questions. So feel free to enter them in the Q&A box below.
Along the way, we don't have to wait until the end.
Yes, so we don't have to wait until the end. For now, I did not see any questions, so we'll wait a little bit. So the first question will focus on how the context changes at major destination countries that are going to influence how we rethink the issues of international higher education. The second question will focus on the origins of international students, those countries traditional sending the international student, their change, how their change will change the discourse about international education. The second question, as you can see from the chat box, is how should we rethink or update our discourses about international education in light of local changes in major origins of international students, such as China. For example, there is economic rise along with the One Belt, One Road initiative, the India after national policy change, the South Korea after implementation of the Brain Curry 21. Just a short note, the Brain Curry 21 is a project for nurturing highly qualified human resources for the 21st century knowledge-based society. And also you can discuss some other major sources as well.
Let me touch on it a little bit so my friends can elaborate on that. So yeah, the major change we see is that when you think of international students, a lot of times, even we scholars think of it as a one-way traffic, which is no longer true. So for example, China, India, Korea, the top destinations are not only top destinations, not only top origins of international students sending away from their home country, but they are also attracting international students, and the increase is so dramatic that they are now competing the traditional destinations of higher education. So, and there is a concerted government policy effort. China has been doing it for some time. Korea is stopping a lot of its potential students going away through the Brain Korea project. And more interestingly, more recently, India also has realized the soft power that it can create around the world through the educational initiatives. So there is an increase, there is a concerted effort across the ministries in India to create more scholarships and more incentives for international students to come to India. So no longer a one-way traffic. That's where we definitely need to rethink. And again, this is how the scholarship needs to change. We see there are some signs, but again, without changing the way we challenge our own assumption and schema, it is definitely not possible. So we want to see these scholarship reflected again, and in policies, in practices, in curriculum, and student support services.
Thank you very much. So I would like to chime in because I saw there are two comments in the Q&A session. Mm-hmm. And the first comments from Chizing, I'm sorry if I pronounced that in the wrong way. Chizing, hi, welcome to this webinar. You said just adding to the second question and Africa too. Think this is a part of the world whose students are not focused especially on research and scholarship. It's a really good point. The second comment. The second comment from Dr. Tulsi.
Yeah.
In my school in Canada, I see more and more students are coming from India and China, but not from Western Europe and Japan. Mm-hmm. What could be the reasons?
Uttam, want to pick up on the first one?
I'm not sure whether I got it. Go ahead, pick up. You got it?
just adding to the second question, let's think about Africa too. I think it's a part of the world where students are not focused, especially on research and scholarship. So that's a very, very important question, because Africa, the African continent, has been a source of international students, and now increasingly a destination for international students. You look at the numbers of students go to South Africa, right? And there are many national missions about for increasing the number of international students, even when we hear sometimes in this Western narrative that there are no enough seats for domestic students there. But all nations are now interested in internationalizing, right? I was in Philippines past summer, and there's this discussion that in order to make universities good, great, global, prestigious, universities are inviting and attracting students from other countries. And so this is a global phenomenon, and that has changed the dynamics of international students, because it's no longer one-way traffic of students coming from the east to the west, from non-English speaking countries to the English-speaking countries, from less developed countries to the more developed countries. Those simplistic narratives don't work anymore, because if you actually look at the bigger numbers, the US may be still number one as a lump sum figure. But if you look at the total number of students, there are 4.75, I think, million students, Krishna, who are studying outside of their home. And the motivations for them are not exactly the same. It's not like, oh, I want to go to a more advanced country, learn to speak English, and go to the world's best university. That may work for 20% of the people. For the rest of the people, it may not. There may be an auntie next in another country where they can go study because it's easier to cover the cost. There may be a different kind of motivation for the students to do that, right? And so these are the reasons that our narratives, our scholarships, our schemas, as Dr. Gaulee put, are not enough. And as to the question of Dr. Tarel asking why students from Europe and Japan are not coming, it may be the same thing that Dr. Gaulee talked about. Like, there was a national initiative by the government to decrease the number of students going out. We don't talk about these national policies because especially in the United States, there are no national policies, but instead market forces. Instead, indirect effect of immigration policy changes. But instead, universities doing their own thing on a lot of different ways. John F. Kennedy tried to actually counter that. He said in one of his speeches that we cannot let these uncontrolled, unregulated universities create a market that is messy, because we need a national message to invite these people from around the world, to welcome and make them feel good, go back as ambassadors. They had that national vision. We have exactly the opposite now, with somebody who doesn't want people that look different to come here. Well, except maybe there are exceptions about certain people making a certain amount of money and that kind of thing. But yes, these are the dynamics. I think it all again goes back to the political dynamics and how these things can change things in ways that we don't realize. And they can also create patterns and narratives, discourses, and blind spots. In 20, 30 years' time, the thing that we took for granted is no longer there. And that's why we need to look forward and see what these winds are doing to our field, and so often to our institutions and to our professions. Dr. Gaulee, Dr. Bista?
Yeah.
Sorry. Again, when we look into the scenario from the recruitment perspective, some of the colleges, campuses across the country are spread thin in their funding or the human resources, so they are not able to look into all the countries or everywhere on the planet to have a balanced set of students. The other thing is, when you look into the European Union or more European universities, they do have the same rigor, and sometimes the professor or the student may not see the need of going another country, and they do have a scholarship and certain plan or strategies for these students. The other thing is also, nowadays, with so many branch campuses of these international or global universities in different locations, the students are more in those areas, regional areas, local areas, rather than crossing the border or going other countries. But traditionally, the recruitment strategy was not so much balanced to reach out a student from different part of the globe. That's why we didn't have many students or a student from one country, compared to the other countries.
I also wonder if there is an unstated bias and unstated narratives about these student groups, so that the Indian students become the new technology superstar, right? Whether or not that is factually true, then that becomes a narrative. Oh, Indians are smart, and therefore we're going to go for the Indians for all the technology jobs, until somebody found out last year they're really good at it. The problem was they did a study of many the Indian students in the Silicon Valley, and it turns out these students have been ignoring since they were younger these other social skills, academic communication skills, professional soft skills. And therefore, somebody wrote in that report that these students are not qualified to hold jobs in the American technology industry. And then now there may be this another narrative that says, no, Indians are not good. So we don't know if those kinds of things we need to study. I'm saying this not as based on deep research and methodological rigorous way, but there is a little bit of research that I'm sort of referring to, and I'm making this sort of guess as to whether these narratives may push and create this wind, so that a university may say, oh, let's go to Africa now. Africa's cool, and that may last for 10 years. And then something happens and people say, oh, let's go to Korea. They're making more money. Let's see if we can have more of their money. I don't know. I hear these kinds of things actually sometimes, because like I hear people bluntly saying, oh, there's more money in China. Why not turn there? Until some universities, let me not name names, have 75% students from China. And I'm thinking, there is 200 countries in the world. How did you do that? And I don't know, it could be money, it could be politics, or it could be sometimes racial politics. It could be other kinds of politics. You see what I'm saying? I don't think a lot of American universities are actively recruited from Mexico, except when they were like, oh, let's counter this narrative that is coming at us. We shouldn't do that, right?
I would like to chime in with the comments from Dr. Tilsey. I think more and more students are coming to the US and Canada from the third world countries, not only for the study, but they have a dream that they could be leaving these countries after their study completed. This may not apply for Western European and Japanese students. I think this is a very good point, because there are emerging studies on the intention of the students to stay or to leave the United States after.
That's a big factor. I think that's the most established factor. In fact, when students go to the visa interview for the F1 visa, they say, I have no intention to stay. But wink, wink, even the visa interviewer knows that if the student is a talented, extraordinary scientist, they're probably in the back of their mind, they're probably like, oh, if you're smart enough and you make it, go into the next. So that is a known, even though it contradicts with the national immigration policy, it is a known kind of issue that students are pursuing their dreams beyond their. I'm not sure if Europeans and Japanese don't come here only because they don't want to stay here. Maybe they don't want to study here in the first place either. You see what I'm saying? Because most of the students actually return. Even though the narrative out there is that they try to stay, we look at those people who try hard to stay, because we don't see the people that didn't stay because they're gone, they're left. And somebody was saying that the total number of students, international students leaving after studies, 86% is, but we talk about the 16 because they're here. Right?
Well, that brings us to very, very interesting arena of potential thinking that we could, dilly-dally sometimes. For example, like Dr. Sharma mentioned, the positive stereotypes of Indian international students, for example, as being very.
There's an underbelly of that negativity also.
And we do not lack the negative stereotypes as well. Even the current president of the United States allegedly said disparaging comments about the countries in general. So this generalizing, this empathizing or sympathizing, and even infantilizing the international students and